Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to actually join us today at our TELedvisors uh, webinar. This is typically was supposed to be for April, but with the break and everything, we decided to actually push it to today. My name
Yes.
is Olivia. I'm your host for this session today, and the topic for today's webinar is how to influence as third space practitioners. I wanted to start with just begin by saying warami to you, which I have just learned that it means hello. Good to see you. In the language of the Darug people from whom I come to you today. I'm in Western Sydney. The Darug people is the traditional custodians of the land where I live. I acknowledge and pay respects to their elders, past and present, and extend these to the traditional owners of the lands from which you are joining today from in this webinar. And I invite you to acknowledge those traditional custodians in the chat. So, Warami, we're here. Really great to see everybody. So today, one I would just wanted to have a session talking about some of the challenges that we all as a sector over the years have been trying to achieve to one of the challenges that we're trying to address. We are all working towards a better learning experience for students as third space practitioners, but a lot of us don't have the formal authority that our role um, lack the formal authority to sometimes actually deliver some of the changes that are required of us. And so want to take some time today to actually listen to both Gavin and Julie today, whom I'm invited to actually share their experiences. Gavin, in particular, I've asked to speak about his work around working with IT teams to deliver tech projects. Julie, I've asked to talk from her perspective as a faculty leader. So let's just get started. I want to introduce Gavin to you. Gavin leads the Educational Technology Strategy team at the University of Technology, Sydney, and he oversees the selection and prioritization of pedagogically sound learning technologies. So as part of this, he manages the stakeholder consultation process and collaborates with various units to monitor and manage UTS's digital learning ecosystem. He represents the university in user groups and vendor meetings to advocate for improvements and bring external knowledge into the organization. So today, as I said before, I've asked him to actually share his experience and his strategies in how he influences and collaborate with technical teams in IT to enhance the student experience. So Gavin, over to you. I
Thanks,
have
Olivia.
shared. I'll stop sharing now so you can share
Yep.
your presentation.
Okay, great. Can everyone see my PowerPoint slide? Okay, great. Thank you. So thank you, Olivia, for giving me an introduction. I'll do my best to give you some really useful tips today as I go through. I think it's important to note that I've come from an education background. I have a PhD in education technologies, and I spent over 13 years as an academic in the School of Education before I moved into this role. So I have sort of some interesting experience where I didn't start as an IT professional. I came from education and then I've led in, so I understand the challenges of, picking up the language and understanding the processes and all that's involved. And I think that can be a useful knowledge sharing experience for you guys, or I hope it is. Um, I thought this was an interesting quote and one that I'm still trying to make sure I embody. Time and reflection change the sight little by little till we come to understand. And what I want to say here is that technology requests often arise unexpectedly for IT and my team, and they come with expectations of rapid delivery. So it's not uncommon for us to get a request where an academic says, "Hey, I want this technology for my subject. I want to purchase it or my faculty has purchased it and I want you to support it. We would do that through the integrations into Canvas. That's where we would come in as a centrally supported team in that space. And then they're like, oh, I want it for this session. And it's 6 weeks, 4 weeks out of session. Things don't happen that quickly. So we'll talk about that today. So on the next slide here, I just want to talk about how we can be influential in the technology space and how we can, hopefully better achieve what we want with learning technologies, support, procurement, etc. So just looking at the first point here, or I guess I should actually go to my notes here. So learning technology vendors tend to highlight the positive aspects of their products. They downplay or overlook any limitations or drawbacks, and they overstate the quality of their product outcomes. So I'll just give you an example. So a media player vendor that we work with recently suggested that their new AI feature was 100% accurate. And it was actually drawing from closed captions, which we know aren't 100% accurate unless they're human created. So just be aware that many sales reps are not educational experts as well, and or they do not work with students day to day as you do. So if you do have a vendor reach out to you through email, or you might meet them at a conference, or even if somebody in your faculty or someone suggested technology, my first point here is to consider the impacts of the technology, perspectives of students, teachers, administrators, and other types of support teams. IT would be one as well. And if you can capture that when you talk to IT, you'll be able to be more influential because you've considered the value of the product and any issues that may arise as well. You might even have some solutions when you come to the meeting to talk about your technology requirements. The next point, become informed about similar products and use cases within the faculty or university. Scalability is important, more important even now. We don't want to have lots of, first of all, just because someone suggested a technology doesn't mean it's the best fit for your needs, and it doesn't mean that it's the best technology on the market for various reasons. So it doesn't hurt to do some research and just have a look at the other types of products and get a little bit informed. When you talk to IT, you can share that and say, hey, this was something I was interested in, but there's a few other options and happy to discuss. My team is one team that does that type of investigation as well. So you could begin it and we'll do a deeper dive into the technologies. We could perhaps find a better solution. If we can find that there are similar technologies being used at the university, it would be much easier to have a technology being, you could pick up a technology to use in your subject, not only faster, but you'd be more influential in getting it because we've already procured it. We already have a license. We've already, gone through cybersecurity checks and all of that. So it's worth doing that. And scalability, of course, helps reduce the workload on IT and support in terms of supporting many similar products. When we could have a single solution, and it also could often be cheaper as well because a scalable license is generally cheaper than having small licenses that we're paying for the similar technology. Going to the next point, identify the gatekeepers who decide which technologies will be investigated for procurement and which will not. There are key people in your university, your faculty, as well, because as you know, we can procure technology from a faculty side, or we can procure from a centrally supported side. And so find out who the people are who make those decisions. And of course, you want to have meetings with them and you want to influence them to make them see the value of it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. Understand the roles and responsibilities within the university and build relationships accordingly. So, try to find out who are the teams that support procurement or support ongoing, issues, because we all know we might have, bugs that we can identify. We may have, say, feature requirements. We might say, oh, I'd love it if this technology could, automate groups in it so that I don't have to manually do that work. So, understanding the roles and responsibilities and keeping in contact with those people to build relationships is useful. And start your inquiry early and manage expectations. And I talked back to the first quote around, it takes time to procure technology, minimum 3 months. And I'm over exaggerating that, probably more like 6 months to longer. There are university-wide epics, so technologies that are on the big picture for the university, and they'll be pre-planned in the IT schedule. So having something that is new and maybe a limited use case within the uni is actually difficult to achieve often, and you really need to state your case of how beneficial it is to the students and to the university. And as I said, scalability, can it be used in other areas? And that comes back to the managing expectations as well. Think ahead and align to the university timetable as well. So when would be the best time for the university to deploy it? How long does it lead up to do that? And with things like new feature requests or bug fixes, they're really complicated to often have a solution or to have it implemented. It requires multiple teams, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, and also internal and external teams as well. And we don't have control over external teams. So the vendor, for example, might say, yeah, write a ticket, we'll get to it. We can't control when they get to it. However, we can be influential in that, and we do that by meeting with the vendor, clearly stating our case, and meeting with them regularly to push, and we do that regularly. Successful IT partnerships are built on understanding and empathy. What we need, what is useful to understand, because academics have a timetable where you have your sessions, and you uplift your existing materials or write new ones, and you uplift your courses, and then you deliver, and you're meeting assessments and marking, and then putting the grades together, and then sending them through to your centralized grading exam center. We have CAS in our university. IT has their own, processes, and they're also really busy, as academics are, busier than ever. And there's some reasons why, and I'll just talk a little bit about how they can work, because there's different ways you can work. At UTS, we use an agile approach. So every quarter, they have planning events, and they identify these sort of high up strategic projects that they do to have significant outcome through the university. They coordinate, and that makes up, and you'll see in the notes here, it talks about workload. That makes up a smaller portion of their work. At UTS, in the last planning event for our teaching learning curriculum credentials team, it was about 50% was their project work, and then the other 50% or more is business as usual. So supporting bug fixes, maintaining integrations, testing feature updates. So for example, Canvas, has regular releases, so we have to test those. So there's a lot of work that they do. It churns, so they often are constantly pulling work from what they call a backlog. So if what they're not currently working on is in a backlog, so they're always working, they're often juggling multiple things at the same time. So when you come in with, oh, can we have a meeting? I want to talk about this or I want to talk about that. Understand that it's going to be either something that has to be planned into the next quarter, and it has to be justified in terms of the impact. The bigger the impact, for student learning or for operational sustainability? Does it automate something that requires a lot of human effort? Those things will get prioritized. If you're lucky, they'll have the time to start to look at it in their day-to-day business as usual work. But I think it's important to note that. Also understand that the gatekeepers are often heads of department or managers of teams, and their KPIs are mixed. So they are not only managing one or more multiple teams, they also have to have vendor meetings, and they also support the day-to-day work often as well. They get their hands in and support their team as well. So they're busy people. And I did touch on the procurement process as I talk through that. Moving to the second last slide. So just talking about communication, and this is a tricky one. We have our jargon in education. We know about jargon is that it is constantly updated and changed. We're like, oh, we're now, instead of referring to this, we're now talking about it with this language. IT has similar changing language as well. And it's good to know the language to be able to obviously, communicate clearly with each other. But just before I talk about some more of that, I just thought it'd be interesting to briefly talk about John Maxwell's 18 Invaluable Laws of Communication. He's a #1 bestseller New York Times author, and he's a leadership expert. So he's got some interesting points. And a few of the points from the 16 laws that I thought were contextual and useful. The law of connection. Communication is all about connecting with people. If you can't connect with others, you can't communicate effectively. Connect to people's hearts, I think, is an interesting one to gain their buy-in. So thinking about IT professionals' hearts, and don't forget, when we talk about teams involved, we could think about there's accessibility teams as well. There's also learning designers involved in this process. It's not just technology. So one of the ways, or one of the things when we think about heart is access and inclusion, which is something that is a big one for me. So you can buy in through that empathy of others. You could buy in by talking about reduced workloads in terms of, hey, could we automate this and, reduce the workload on this system or this group of people or this person? But think about the buy-in there. The next one, the law of the big picture. And I think this refers to what we talked about scalability and impact. Communicate with the end goal in mind. Be clear about what you want to achieve, and then craft your message accordingly. Have a clear objective when communicating with others. So going back to a couple of points there, we talked about thinking about the impact to students, impact to educators, impact to admins, impact to support staff, maybe grade admins, and coming to the meeting with a real full picture of, I want to bring this technology in, here are the benefits, and here are some scalability ideas here. I can see we have similar options, or I've reached out to some academics or other schools or faculties, and I can see that they've also said this would be useful for them. Really great to come in with that information. That comes back to the heart as well for IT, because they're like, all for my team strategy. They're like, oh, thank you for doing some of the pre-work for us. That's really great. And the last one, of course, that I've picked out as, really relevant from those 16 laws is listening. Effective communication is a two-way street. Listen to others and seek to understand their perspective. I think an important part here is to understand too, to ask questions. I don't understand that acronym. You just use it. Everyone loves acronyms. Could you explain the value of an LTI? Why would we integrate this technology and not say, use an iframe or something like that? So having some ask questions all the time. They're always happy to, to help out. And the last part here, take the time to understand some relevant terminology. LTI is a really useful one to know. Um, it's a standard that allows different learning technologies to communicate, to work together seamlessly. It enables education tools and applications to integrate with learning management systems. It also helps with a single sign-on solution, so it makes the onboarding for students easy, and it often allows things like pulling off grades from the integrated tool through into the LMS grades. It can also be useful for taking student groups or sections from Canvas or Blackboard and pulling that into the integrated tool to set up student workflow and academic workflow if that's something that's relevant. So that's one that you would hear a lot about. I thought I'd end with a case study of something that's been very successful at UTS. And GROW's objectives and key results framework is something that can help sort of just at least guide this discussion, and something that we do in whether we do it directly to Groves or we do it as a part of our workflow, is focus, alignment, commitment, tracking, and stretching. So we've had a multi-teams group that has been working on supporting our AI invigilation exams tool. It has been successful in enhancing the student experience with exams. The multiple teams involve exams team, education technology and strategy team, which is my team, education technology support team, which is Olivia's team, learning designers, IT support, and accessibility team and faculty liaison. So it's a real mixed group of teams. How it works successfully is that we meet internally and we identify our requirements. We do testing of the product at multiple ways. Does it work for academics successfully? Does it work for students? And considerations of student experience. I'm under pressure. I may not have read the communications on how to do this properly. Support, accessibility, and we have constant meetings and documentation, and we share that. And then we discuss the most important things, and we put them into a priority list. And we identify any types of enhancements that we may want from the product. One of those was accessibility in this instant. And then we have regular monthly or fortnightly meetings, depending on whether we're in an exam period or not, and with the vendor. And we constantly pursue and make clear our requirements from them, including we've got bugs, and we would like these enhancements, and we try to pin them down with dates as best we can. So we'd say, can you give us a reasonable date? Can you give us an update on how these are progressing? And we share our lists of fixes and requirements with the vendor, and have constant communications, and it's been incredibly successful. And the collaboration has resolved some technical challenges such as ID verification for students when they go into the AI invigilated exam, browser compatibility issues that we've had, and that's all through that successful negotiating and collaboration. It has improved significant reduction in student anxiety and technical difficulties during exams. It has led to a more seamless and supportive exam experience. And accordingly, exam support issues have decreased during the exams period, reducing the overall load on support services. So I'm open to any questions. I hope that was useful.
There's certainly a few questions in comments that have popped up in the chat, and I want to just do land on one of Kate's comments, and I'm just going to read it out because you probably haven't had a chance to read it yet.
No, I haven't been looking at questions.
I am looking. Okay. So Kate said there's some things around timing, for example, as part of tender processes. She's talking about having to sign confidential agreements. So some items can be shared until the end of the project or project close. But she made a comment about project close and moving to BAU. She has found it not always been done so well. And so makes getting lessons learned hard. Do you have any tips or thoughts on how we can get better at that with our IT partners?
Hmm. First off, that's really common, and we have that problem. I would say to come with solutions. So identify the problems, um, maybe have collaboration with some subject matter experts, which includes the professionals. Of course, they're subject matter experts, and say, here are the identified issues that I have, found during this particular project. Um, can we have a talk about how we could maybe, correct some of these moving forward? I would work on documenting them as a process and then sharing them with the influential people within IT and support. Hopefully they'll respond to those.
I would like to actually open questions up to everybody at the moment. Feel free to unmute. We're a small enough group today that if you want to unmute yourself and ask Gavin your questions, um, or share a comment, or if you wanted to share a provocation. There's a question from the chat from Mark, Gavin. What's your advice if there is not an established culture of communication between, say, learning designers and academics and leadership?
First, identify who are the important touch points of communication with IT. And one way to do that is to identify the teams and then go to the team head and begin a conversation around who would be useful to have those, discussions. Um, Reach out to maybe other schools and faculties and ask them if they have a process. But really identify, even if it's one person within IT that you can get a connection with, they will be able to help to lead you on to others. And then who are the right people to form a team? I would be asking around who are the people or teams involved when we do a technology procurement? Who are the teams involved when we would like a new feature requested for a technology? And then when you start to get those teams, you can start to work on, identifying the people that are interested and engaged. And you'll actually find that they generally are really interested to get the user experience and to have meetings because they're obviously wanting to do the best work they can as well.
Mm, thanks. Dan had a question about UX. User stories are a nice way to engage people and tell simple stories. Is there any other UX type tools you recommend?
In terms of communication, I think user stories are great. I think that they are a great way to identify to be in the persona of the user. And they're also a standard way, or they're a standard way that agile IT teams work. It uses a language that everybody can understand. It generally avoids jargon. So I think they're really, really good. Other types of user experience that you could talk about, of course, is using the tool. So you could say, for example, as a student in an, say, AI invigilated exam, I want to be able to enter the exam as seamlessly as possible. I wanted to be able to do my exam in a way that doesn't add any extra work or stress on me. So what I mean by that is if I'm doing a sit down written assessment, um, and I'm just on my computer in a room, I would like that to be a similar experience for online invigilation. I would like to know how I'm being monitored and what could get me in trouble. I mean, there's an AI invigilation system there that would worry me. So that's a user experience as well. Another one could be accessibility. As a student with, color blindness, I want to be able to read through, or I want to be able to read the menu items and hyperlinks and information in my learning tool without having to, adjust my screen contrast or, settings. So I think user stories are very powerful.
Thank you, Gavin. There are a few more questions in the chat, but in the interest of time, I just want to move on to hear what Julie, as a faculty leader, has for us. So, Gavin, I think you said you had some time. You're staying on, so maybe you want to have a chat, have a look at the chat. There are a couple of questions that Colin has summarized towards the end about how do you get pilot projects going, small project pilot going. So let me just introduce one sec. Let me just introduce to you Julie. Julie, hang on, let me just find my notes. I am so sorry. So, while Julie gets the slides up, I want to give Julie a good introduction. So, Professor Julie Robert, the French pronunciation, Robert, is the Dean of Learning and Teaching and Arts Educate Dean Learning and Teaching at the Arts Education and Law Faculty at Griffith. She's also a Principal Fellow, um, Principal for the Advanced HE. She has nearly 2 decades of teaching experience in the French language, Francophone literature, and cultural studies, and she supervises undergraduates research in a study abroad setting. She accomplished one of her major accomplishments in learning and teaching include an Australian Office of Learning and Teaching citation for her work to strengthen the link between foreign language curriculum and pedagogy. She has led major curriculum renewal projects focused on multidisciplinary and dual degrees and has initiated a range of L&T projects across undergraduate, postgraduate, and micro-credential studies. Today, I've asked her to share some strategies on how best to collaborate with faculty, or as we joked when we talked about this webinar, how do you make friends with faculty? Over to you, Julie.
All right. Thanks, Olivia. Can you hear me, everyone? Sorry, I can't see much.
Yes, all good.
Excellent. Okay. So I've worked in what are effectively faculty-based L&T leadership roles at 2 different universities now. And I've been involved, as Olivia graciously said, with a lot of university-wide projects, including central unit restructures. And my experience is very much where the day-to-day of individual academics intersects with institutional priorities. Some of you have heard me say this before. I'm also a giant curriculum nerd, and I love playing curriculum Tetris. So I've worked in a very highly centralized context, and that's where I met Olivia. And in my work at Griffith, I came into what was a very, very decentralized context. The other thing I will say is I'll begin with a bit of a disclaimer, and for me, all things go back to French. So I'm going to speak very much for myself, not for my institution, and I might be a little bit provocative. So bear that in mind. I think one of the big things to do is to harness your credibility when you're working with academics. And part of that is really knowing your context. Some of your academics are going to be really up to date on this, and others are not going to have very much situational awareness. So I think in our current moment, realism is really important. It's not going to go back to the good old days of being in a faculty or in a university where money and time are abundant. It's not the same for students. It's not also the same for you as third spacers and professional staff. So I think the more we operate in that realistic context, the better. Picking your moments is also really important. So understanding when you can go to an academic to ask something or to offer something based on the rhythms of their calendar is going to buy you credibility or save you from potentially getting a little bit of a blast in an email. Similar to what Gavin was saying, I think knowing who your decision makers are and who holds power for them is really important. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but your key things are who controls the budgets, who's got the positional power, and then also who has that soft power in the organization. You might have 5 or 6 associate deans, but there's definitely a ringleader. And that might be the person, if you're in a central unit, that you want to form a closest alliance with. Watch meeting dynamics, watch how things play out, ask quiet questions, and then try and take your cues accordingly. And whether that's at the university level, the faculty level, or the school level. Knowing who can unlock things for you is likely to be really important. Bottom line is definitely driving a lot of decision making. So that the old adage of what is measured is what matters is going to help you get traction. So things like student retention, student success, employability, these are all really key because they tie in with performance-based funding. They also tie in with student revenue. So we'll delve into that a little bit more later. Breaking down the silos is probably one of the harder things that you're going to have to do with academics, in part because academics for a long time have traditionally worked at the course level. You can have people working in the same program, especially in unaccredited disciplines. You know, I come out of the Bachelor of Arts, which in some universities is 3 EFSL worth of courses, and congratulations, you wrap a bow on it. Knowing what is happening in the courses that precede and follow theirs is not necessarily intuitive across all disciplines. So the more you know, the more you can help share that knowledge out. And as Gavin said, knowing who is in your ecosystem is going to be really helpful because you can be that connector out to various people. So librarians, IT folks, people in student services, people doing business development if you're working in a micro-credential space, marketing. I spent a lot of time working with marketing. You never know when those connections are going to come in handy and essentially allow you to showcase your worth beyond just your job description. And as an associate dean who has dealt with student complaints before, being able to separate out the myth from the actual policy is so important, especially around things like assessment. So just delving a little bit more into what is now a bit of a dated set of memes, but they really do speak to the realities and the perceptions around working with academics. Good collaborations really depend on mutual understanding. And you know, yes, it requires academics to understand the work that you do and the value that you bring, but I'm not talking to them here today. So we'll stick to the one side. I think in the context of a contemporary university, it's really important to acknowledge that we have essentially 2 workforces in parallel. Academics have a separate collective bargaining arrangement. They have different metrics around promotion. What is rewarded for them is very different than what's rewarded for professional staff. And even for those of you working in the third space, if you've got an academic background, your employment contracts are probably not academic employment contracts. So how academics are valuing their time and how their heads of school are going to value their time is going to be quite different from how that shakes out for you. So just to drill into this a little bit more, your typical academic workload is the 40-40-20. So 2 days a week on teaching, And then essentially 42 days a week on research, and then the service, the 1 day a week can be engagement, it could be many other things. Typical third space workload, and my typical workload as a dean L&T, 100% of my workload and my KPIs are in the L&T space. The other thing there is I control zero teaching workforce. I have 620 academics who work in our group. I do not get to assign teaching or evaluate performance for any one of them. That all goes through our heads of school. So if there is one relationship I would encourage you to really nurture, it's the heads of school or department, because they've got the teaching KPIs that sit with them. If you want academics to do something, it has to go through them. If you come to me in the first place, I'm going to have to go through them anyway. So it's always knowing who controls the workforce and where the KPIs are sitting. Probably no big surprise. Academics are often promoted around research, not on L&T. That is shifting, and I remind everybody that L&T pays the bills in most contemporary universities. But it's a lot easier and still more obvious, including if you're in a group of 8, if you're in a research-intensive discipline. That's where we're going to start seeing academics naturally gravitate as they're moving towards promotion. So I've always kind of got 2 academic models in my head. One, the nerds like me, they are keen beans. They love L&T. They will come to you. They will pitch ideas. They've got new tools. They've got lots of things that they will be investing their time in. And some of them are on a teaching intensive workload. Sometimes they're not. But these are probably your people in that they love L&T. They love education. Sometimes they like the tech. And then you've also got your tricky customers. And they're going to be the ones who are going to grumble. You can't get them to do anything. You might be needing to try and influence them, and you just can't get traction. Where you're going to have the greatest impact is, like any sort of bell curve, is when you start playing to that middle. And how you do that is in large part about what you can offer them or how you can convince them of things. So part of this is getting them to think more strategically about their own careers. And this is where conversations with heads of school can be really important. So getting some of the keen beans away from, as Gavin said, I found this great new tool, I want to use it, I want to pilot it, and they can spend a lot of time getting into that. But that can lead to what for them is innovation churn. So they can spend a lot of time on that and a lot of your time on that. But they're not necessarily building impact and scalability in their own work. And as they look to progress from level C to level D, so that jump into the professoriate, they need to be showing leadership. So they need to be thinking about things that are going to scale. So that's in a mutual point of interest. The other thing is anytime they're investing a lot of effort, but not necessarily deriving impact and outcome from it. So where do you go? Probably the best thing that you can ever say to an academic is, would you like me to take care of that for you? And when you're starting off, especially establishing relationships, they always talk about the importance of an early win. Find some low-hanging fruit, deliver on it early, and you are instantly going to build a whole lot of credibility with them. The number one bugbear for academics is stuff that they don't have to do very often, and they essentially have to relearn that process every time they do it. So anytime we can take care of that for them, massive, massive kudos for you. If you can connect them with somebody who can help them with their problem, and you can do that warm handover for them, that might be raising a ticket on their behalf, or it's just leveraging your knowledge of the institution, especially for new academics, ECRs who are just starting out. A suggestion around how you can save them time, or how you can help them to work a little bit more strategically. So we're going to package this all up. We'll do it once, and then you're set for the entire semester is usually something that's going to be received much more favorably than a string of requests over the course of the semester. The other thing is remembering that you might have access to a whole team. So it might be that something is important, but it doesn't need to be important for that person. It can be important for somebody else. So thinking about the structure of your teams and how you can mobilize those to the greatest effect. And then just really quickly, I'll finish up here. If you're going to deliver PD, I think probably the greatest thing that you can do is to deliver engaging PD in that sense of really showcasing what good teaching looks like. We all learn from examples, and anybody who's sitting in an hour and a half training session wants to have great examples to learn from. Thinking about how you mobilize evidence to create that burning platform for change. So sometimes it's getting access to some student data, using national survey data. That's going to highlight challenges, but also highlight opportunities. And academics do often want to see that evidence. Scholarship is important. A lot of you are very familiar with the scholarship. A little bit goes a long way. And probably the last thing I'll say is around that mutual respect point. And it's a tension I've been seeing coming out quite a lot in some of the literature around third space, academics, the need for partnership. There's a danger that we can drift into a bit of a defensive territory. So starting those relationships well, and I think also acknowledging that a lot of academics are feeling a little bit pressured and under threat as well. The nature of what it is to be an academic is really being challenged, and it's kind of going to the core of identity for a lot of them. If we're doing asynchronous lectures, am I still needed? If we're using AI automations, what's my role? So there is an identity crisis within the academy that, like for everybody in a budget constrained environment, goes to livelihood. But I think there is also a deep sense of uncertainty about where am I adding value in this process, and what is my role in what was effectively a medieval institution that has had a very profound shift with so much information now being available online and tools. I want to leave time for questions, so I'm going to stop right there, and we'll turn it over to Olivia.
Thank you, Julie. I'm sorting through some of the comments that's come in the chat. There's a lot of you're so actually that's my language you're speaking now, Julie. Um, and there was a question earlier from Colin, who I think you may have addressed in your last slide in terms of what is the best way to work with academics, saying, well, you haven't taught this subject in higher education, so why should I be listening to you on advice on teaching? Do you want to just unpack that a little bit, maybe comment on that?
Yeah, I think there's an element of people might not have taught the subject, but you do understand learning. So if you approach that as a very honest thing, I don't know what it is to, and I had this very conversation this morning. We have a conservatorium that sits in my group. I can't carry a tune in a bucket. I am the least musical person that I know. And I'll say, I don't understand what it is to teach viola, but I do understand student experience. What do the students want? What do we need them to get? And then how do we get there together? And then listening to them and just drawing in stuff from general sort of learning science, pedagogy, student experience, I can identify some opportunities for them. But it's never me trying to pretend or to market myself as an expert in that area. I have to say, when I took on this job, the conservatorium was the most frightening aspect of the role I was taking on. We're always out of our comfort zone. So I guess don't go in trying to be an expert in anything that you're not, but also there's a ton of discipline specific pedagogy every field has got something. So, and I know that some of you move around from one faculty kind of liaison role or faculty-based role to another. I've seen people move from arts to medicine and vice versa. You have to get up to speed on that new context. So you can read around in the discipline-specific journals as well.
Great advice. Thanks for that. Kate has a little bit of a comment and then probably
Mm,
maybe a provocation.
yes.
She's interested in how to push that zone of influence without A, ending up stuck in BAU maintenance mode because that's now the workload of being known as the IT person, something I am very keenly aware of. And B, doing that institution-wide resourcing and capacity, if resourcing and capacity is an issue, and C, doing that if the policy is to train academic staff to do things for themselves rather than doing it for them. You and I have conversations about that last part many times, haven't we, Julie?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think we need some creative solutions, and this is where I think finding people who are in those spaces where they can influence policy is really important. Um, I think Olivia and I have had discussions in trade-offs before. Where is it actually better to have a professional staff team do something? And it might not be that, our senior learning designers are doing it, but we might have a flying squad of student casuals that we bring in at peak periods to do that some of that work um, that is, you really don't want to be paying somebody, $200,000 a year to be figuring out how to edit videos, for instance. Like that's not a good use of their time. So I think we need to have some conversation institutionally about how we unbundle some of the academic labor. Part of that influence comes through here's an alternative solution. I'm never afraid of a one-page options paper. I think it's one of the best things that you can do. I've got an idea. Can I talk to you about it for 5 minutes? If I'm interested, can you put it to me as a pitch on a page? And then I can take that forward. I can champion it with a DVC. I can champion it with my dean, a dean equivalent or a PVC equivalent, or the director of an institute. So don't overinvest in putting together an idea, but if you see an opportunity for improvement based on those user stories, go for it.
Okay. Um, there's a lot of comments and appreciation for some of the advice that you are giving at the moment that you've
Mm.
given. Um, I'm reading one from Tom at the moment. As a bit of a strategy, use features of the software to nudge the academic staff to better work practices. As an example, we are using rubrics and spreadsheets this semester as the staff had not been shown them in the LMS. And it's an interesting way to scaffold that understanding that digital skill into the LMS. That's a great one. We've got time. It's bang on 1 o'clock. If anyone has any final questions they would like to ask Julie or Gavin, feel free to say it now, to ask them now before we close for the day.
I'm happy if anybody wants to email me after the fact as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. It looks like everybody needs to go to the next meeting. Thank you so much for your time today. And really, really big thank you to Julie and Gavin for sharing their insights and their experiences and sharing some of their strategies that they've used. I picked up a few more new things today that I want to try in my work. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.